Hey, we're here. Excellent. Episode 9, guys. We're back. Product Strategy Live. Welcome, Melissa, Michael. How y'all doing?
Doing good. I can't believe we've done this like 9 times already. Time is really flown,
Yeah,
right?
it has. We've been a little bit lapsed over the last couple of months, but this is a big one. Going to be talking all things VMworld. Michael, how you doing?
Yeah, good. It's been busy. Seem to be doing more
Yeah.
work with this lockdown lark, right? Rather than jumping on planes and breakout sessions and the like.
That's it. Yeah, it's been strange, but this is VM. We should have already had one VMworld, shouldn't we? Like usually
last week in August, right? Usually
last week of August, all the time, and that's been the tradition for so long for us. And Michael and I have done sessions together for the past two or 3 years. I think 3 years, right?
Oh,
It's 3 in a row.
We've been there for 3. Yeah, you did it with Danny, but yeah.
That's 3. That's right. Yeah. So we've done a few sessions over the years. Melissa, I've seen you there, obviously.
Yeah, I've done a couple sessions too. Yeah.
But we can't be there this year, so that's a bit disappointing, right? But it's still on. Like everything this year, it's transitioned into a virtual event. It's an interesting one because at this time of the year, I'm sure we're all a little bit kind of, what's the word, over virtual events. And I think while we all know the reality is that we have to deal with them, we are all still saying that we're kind of sick and tired of them. And, this team has been doing a few. We've actually got one coming up in a couple of weeks of our own, Veeam Live. But, that said, we can still enjoy these sessions and these events as they are. I mean, Ignite was this week, actually. So
that's right, yeah.
It's interesting that we've got Ignite, then we've got VMworld, and I think there's a HashiCorp event, Michael, isn't there, in a couple of weeks as well?
Yeah, is it like the first or second week of October, I think? It's like the American. Exactly. Sometime mid-August, there was the European event that was on European time zone, and then that, I assume, is repeated, or knowing HashiCorp, they'll be doing something completely different, completely new, announcing new products and new features and stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the second week of October.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about VMworld 2020. So it's live this year. It's online. There's a combination of on-demand sessions and what they're deeming to be live sessions as well. So I'm not too sure how live the live sessions are exactly, but certainly I know that there are some on-demand sessions. Now, I did a bit of an analysis this week. So every year on the blog, anthonyspiteri.net, I just got it in there. VZilla, VMIS, we've all got those tags, haven't we? However, every year I do this thing where I look at all the session, I look at the content catalog, and I try and go and look at the keywords, at trends and
figure out the theme for the year, basically, right? Usually you can do that.
Pretty much, yeah. And what's interesting, if you look back in the last couple of years, so take out last year and then look at the previous 4 years, it was all about still NSX, it was about vSAN, it was about there. But, slowly, it's not surprisingly, last year it kind of turned on its head and we started to talk about Kubernetes, right? Cloud,
security, AWS, a big security component as well the last couple of years, right?
Well, I've got a good one about security that we'll talk about later, and it's what they're calling at the moment. But from what I've seen this year, obviously there's less sessions, right? I think from memory, if I haven't looked at the blog, but effectively last year I think it was about 1,350 sessions. This year there's only about 700 odd sessions, and I think some of those are repeated as well.
Only 700 sessions.
Yeah, 700, but I think there's a lot of those in the content catalog that are actually triplicated as well. So I think that number is actually less. But certainly what I've noticed that there's still a lot of sessions around Kubernetes, but that's translated into Tanzu as well. Because I think now VMware might be trying to not really talk Kubernetes as such, but talk Tanzu.
Which makes sense, right? Now that Tanzu is here, right? Let's talk about Kubernetes in the perspective of the VMware people, right? How do we get the VMware people up and running on Kubernetes in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that's easy for them? So I think that makes a lot of sense for that pivot.
Yeah, and actually, so to that end, they've made it really simple. A couple of weeks ago, they announced update 1 for Vsphere 7, right? And maybe we can actually start on that and touch on that and then go into VMworld, because I think that was interesting. Because Michael, I'm going to come to you and talk about some of the enhancements that they've got as well, to get yourself prepared for that. But you know what we're talking about there. But they basically introduced a simpler way to deploy Tanzu on Vsphere in Update 1. So before you needed NSX and a few other bits and pieces, and now it's basically a lot easier because you don't require the NSX underlay. So that simplifies it for a lot of people. Obviously, you don't get the goodness of that, the NSX and what it does in terms of the plugin and its I've said it, intrinsic security. Oh, I thought I'd get that in later. That's the word. That's a new buzzword, intrinsic security. And a shout out to my guy in Melbourne, Marky Cottage, who absolutely loves intrinsic security. So if he's listening to this, he'll understand what that's all about. But I think that was pretty interesting how they've simplified it to get it out there to the masses. And I think we're going to see a lot of that at VMworld next week, where they're going to really solidify that as Tanzu being it now. But Michael, just quickly, there was something to do with performance, which I think is going to be quite interesting from a Veeam perspective. Did you want to just touch on that?
Yeah. So I'm still waiting to get my hands on the code, but apparently around MBD, so network block device, so how we move data between like your production vSphere environment, whether it's vSAN or VMFS, and how we pull that data through our proxy and onto our backup repository. One of the transport modes is MBD. There's other ones in there as well that we have. So we have virtual appliance and which is hotAD. We have storage integration. We've got lots of different ways of being able to move that data in the most efficient and performant way. MBD got I want to say that I've seen numbers around 10 times or 10% faster than what it is today, which is when you're just using the same network, but you're just updating software. That's a pretty impressive stat to throw out there. I need to see it. But I think on top of that, so that's obviously a big thing for us that we want to see, and see how that's developing and how that increases our performance and speed for backups using MBD, in particular around things like vSAN. But then also on that storage front was that they made a huge noise about, with Update 1, with vVols, virtual volumes. And going back to your second comment as well, Spiteri, you last year, there was probably 3 sessions on vVols. The year before, there was probably 12, 15 sessions, just guessing there. But there was a huge drop off that. Whereas I think this year, and you know the number, but
and you know what? I'm just looking at my list now. Do you know what I haven't included in my list? vVols. That probably shows you how it might have been 0 last year, which is why I didn't include it. So let's just take a quick look at the content catalog. Let's do this live, because we are live. If I type in vVol, we get 6 on demand and 1 live. So
probably double than what was there at least last year, right? But and the nature of that is how it's now being leveraged within this Tanzu framework of being how to consume, or what you want to consume from a storage perspective. So I think that's quite interesting how they're getting back into that messaging, because the storage vendors haven't really gone away, or some have, and they've stopped talking about vVols, but some, like the Cody Hosterman over at Pure and HPE wise, that these guys are all talking about, Nick Dyer from Nimble, they're all talking about vVols still, and they're obviously having traction, and customers are obviously going that route. And I think this announcement around vVols and specifically Tanzu with the Cloud Foundation and the storage, I think it opens up a bit more of an intent from VMware. It was always on the storage vendor to do something, and I think now VMware are showing a little bit more love in that space. Is my
and I've used vVols in the labs and played around with it, and also used it when I had my Storage X device. I won't name the specific storage that I was using, but it's just logical and it works. I think it's a great concept. I can't really understand why it hasn't taken off, and it's kind of become the running joke. This VMworld's different. It's live. We'd obviously prefer to be there in person, but sadly we can't. We were talking about the technology trends that are looking to be at VMworld this year. And, like I was saying previously, I do a little bit of a tally every year on my blog And just looking at that now, Michael was just talking about vVols. vVols has about 7 sessions, which Michael said it's double what there was last year. But if I look at what's trending this year from the content catalog, if I look at these keywords, Kubernetes is still up there, mentioned in 119 separate sessions. But I think the really interesting one is that VMware Cloud is actually winning the day now with 172 mentions, which is interesting, right? I think, Melissa, that just shows that VMware is totally, doubling down on this cloud thing. So it was VMware Cloud and AWS, but that's extended completely now, right?
Right, exactly. And I think it's just really interesting. I was talking to someone about this morning in general about VMware's cloud strategy, right? And I think it has a lot of value, obviously, for all VMware customers because, hey, I want to get started in the cloud. But if I'm just going to go directly to Azure, AWS, there's a bit of a learning curve from a management and operations perspective, right? But the VMware clouds allow you to easily move to the cloud and use your existing tools, processes, and procedures and not really need to train your staff that much on operating in the cloud, right? So there's a lot of value from the manageability and operational aspect of cloud migration to just, hey, let me just go to VMware in the cloud. It'll look, feel, and smell just like it did in my data center. It'll be a lot easier for us.
Yeah, and I think what Microsoft, I said Microsoft because that's where I want to lead into, but I think VMware's been really smart in the way they've done it. They've kind of set the tone with VMware Cloud and AWS, let that settle, let people understand the concept of what it is all about, and now go, okay, we've got the Google VMware engine. This week at Ignite, Michael, they did the announcement for the VM. We were talking about that earlier. They've got, VMware on Azure. They've got it on Dell. They got it on Oracle as well. It's just now the time is right. Where maybe 2 or 3 years ago, people were still trying to wrap their head around why they would do this, But I think it's ticking up, right? So, Michael, you've done a lot of work in Azure recently. Do you see that as being a good thing now that you can do VMware workloads in Azure?
I think the whole point about cloud computing is having options to do it. And I think we've said on these shows before is if you've spent the majority of your learning over the last 10 years in Vsphere or in VMware, then VMware on, say, a cloud provider, that it makes sense. Your skill set just moves with it. You don't have to learn Azure, AWS, GCP, Oracle, which all have similar services but different ways of consuming them. So I think it will suit some people. So yeah, I think it's a great play from VMware on that front.
Yeah, and they're certainly pushing it hard, as you can see by the numbers. Close to my heart, there's still so VMware Cloud vCloud Director doesn't exist anymore from the point of view of what it's called, but it's called Cloud Director now, right? So I was looking up vCloud Director and was getting 0 results, and I was getting all angry. And then I looked up Cloud Director and saw that there's about 20 odd sessions on that as well. So good to see there. Interestingly enough, Vsphere still gets mentioned 161 times in the content catalog. vCenter 31, ESXi, which are more these, it's just expected that these are there now. Interestingly enough, vSAN I saw declined a little bit, which is interesting. Last year there was 195 mentions of vSAN in the content catalog. This year there's only 44. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Maybe they're more targeted, more direct, but what do you guys reckon about that? Is that just because of the type of year that it is, because it's a virtual event, or is it something deeper to that?
I think it's part of it, but I think part of it is that vSAN has been so integrated into the core of vSphere as well that, when vSAN first came out, it was a very distinct, different thing, and you focused on vSAN, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's just becoming a natural part of many vSphere deployments. So maybe there isn't the need anymore to push on it so hard because, it has increased in usage and adoption.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point there as well. And I think there's only so much you can talk about it as well. And I think, in the newer sense, in the new 2020 edition, maybe you're talking about all the enhancements that are there in Update 1 for vSphere 7 and vSAN. So yeah, maybe just in terms of sessions, it's just, at its max in terms of what you can actually get out there. But the really interesting thing that I saw, so Tanzu 105, which we all kind of expected and talked about previously. But then Thankfully, from my perspective, Internet of Things and IoT has dropped away almost completely, which is fantastic because as a buzzword, I'm not a big fan of Internet of Things. But multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, that's the big thing this year, right? There's even a very big subsection on that. Multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. Choose your sessions based on whether it's multi or hybrid. Confusing in a sense, but basically they're mentioned quite a bit.
What about hybrid multi-cloud? What about
hybrid
both?
multi-cloud? Just smash it all together. Yeah. But what's popped up as well is 5G. So 5G is up there 32 times.
Really?
Right?
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's really interesting, I thought as well. So yeah, I think the trends are interesting. I mean, for me, VMworld is still the IT event. There's a lot of other vendors that have come up and become relevant, especially with their conferences. But for me, VMware is still the litmus test in terms of where the industry is going. So I always look at these and think, what's the next 12 months got, and it's a really good indicator of that. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about Veeam this year at VMworld. Usually Veeam goes like massively all in at VMworld, right, Michael? Like, it's our big event, it's our flagship event. Just talk a little bit about the experiences that you expect of Veeam at a VMworld, if it wasn't virtual.
Yeah, if we were in person, then you'd expect to land, whether you're in Barcelona or whether you're in San Fran or Vegas or wherever it is. And I'm sure many people watching have experienced this, but you land and it's a sea of green, Veeam banners everywhere. Then we're all in on community efforts. That's a big part, and I know we're going to talk about some of that community stuff in a bit. You're going to see us at like events, and it'll be generally our team, right? So we're not salespeople. We're not going to be ramming down any sales pitch, and generally our sessions are not that way as well. But I think it's fair to say as well that VMworld, like you say, Anthony, is our biggest event outside of our own, but our own event kind of was like we haven't had that as an annual event for every year.
Yes,
until very recently. So VMworld was always the time for us to show up and show our wares and show what we're doing, and it was our time to announce and be loud about everything that we're doing from a point of view.
Yeah, and this year, we've had to tone it down, but we've toned it down from the point of view not being able to be there. But certainly, if people who are listening live, if they go to veeam.com/VMworld, they'll see that we've really tailored a virtual experience. And in fact, we're calling it the Virtual VMworld 2020 experience, right? So there's a good landing page there. There's a whole heap of information that we've got. You can still win a Premier Pass, by the way. So if you head to that site, you can still win the Premier Pass. I think we're running that pretty much up until the day before VMworld, which is next week. So that's valued at $299 US, so nothing to sneeze at there. And as we go through the page, we still have a couple of sessions. So again, a bit differently. So Rick Vanover is doing a session on winning the war on ransomware with Veeam. So Rick loves talking about ransomware. It's very, very topical. So he'll be doing that. And then I've got a session with Andy Sturliano talking about, it's basically a V11 sneak peek as it relates to VMware. So we're going to be talking about all the goodies that are coming in V11 for VMware. And believe me, there are a heap of goodies. In some ways, I was actually pretty glad that we could do this session. Now, full disclosure, this session is not live. This is one of the on-demand sessions. So basically, as long as you log into the VMworld event, you can actually see this session anytime, right? And I'd encourage you all to see it, because I think it's going to give you some good nuggets of information around V11 and some that we haven't actually talked about even at our own event, VeeamON, a couple of months ago. And we've also done a couple of great demos there. So the great thing about not doing it live is that you can kind of tailor the demos to make them more compact and therefore have more bang for buck. Michael and I know very well that trying to fit a demo within 40 minutes can be challenging. But we did it a couple of years ago, didn't we, Michael? That was definitely a great outcome. We were kind of high-fiving when we managed to do that. But I'd encourage you guys to stay for the second half of that session, which is all about showing a great use case with VMware Cloud and our object storage, right? So, yeah, that's the session that Andy and I are doing there. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing with the opening acts and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that if you've ever been to a VMworld, you know, Veeam obviously has a huge community presence all the time. And we've done that in a couple different ways this year. First of all, we are a VM Underground sponsor. So we're sponsoring opening acts, all that good stuff that everybody's come to know and love. And I actually have a sponsored session through VM Underground. So if you're going to Rick's ransomware session, come see my ransomware session with one of my colleagues, Andre, because we're going to do things a little differently and throw some nice demos in there as well. So we'll be talking about ransomware as well, doing some demos, which I'm super excited about because I've been doing a little bit around ransomware lately as well. And then probably the biggest thing when it comes to the community presence of Veeam this year is sponsorship of the V-Trail map. Now, if you're
this
not,
is awesome.
Yeah, this is so cool. So if you're not familiar with the V-Trail map, it's basically your guide to VMworld, and not just VMworld, but VMware technologies and the VMware community in general. Now, traditionally, the V-Trail map is something that is physically handed to you at VMworld. Obviously, we're virtual this year. Probably don't want people touching things all the time with the whole thing going on. So we did it virtual this year. And as you can see, it looks super cool. It looks so awesome. And Andre, once again, on our team, has done a crazy job with the Veeam creative team in creating this for you. So basically, it's accessible now. You can go log into the V-Trail map and you can go click through all the different sections. And within each of these sections, there is a community ambassador with a bunch of links of resources on how to learn more about that specific content area of the V-Trail map.
Yeah. It's on the screen actually right now, so everyone's looking at it right now.
Yeah, it just looks so cool. And you can actually see that everybody at Veeam and a lot of community members, you can see all of our logos kind of hidden in the map in different places, which is really nice, just a really nice touch. Mm. And there's going to be a second version of the V-Trail map coming out that's going to be kind of video game based. So you'll be able to answer questions and do tasks to level up and kind of progress through the ranks of your Vsphere wizardry, for lack of a better term.
Hey, Michael, how good do you reckon this would look as a decal on your office wall?
Like a massive decal, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I've got enough room, but yeah, it'd look super mental.
Maybe we can organize that.
Maybe we can organize like a massive decal like this big and put that in there. Yeah, maybe
exactly. I think it's worthwhile doing. But yeah, so it's a great initiative, right? We were part of it last year as a sub-sponsor. We decided to go all in this year and actually look at it and do it. And, you know, I think it's great for the community. And this year, I think it's more accessible. I think the fact, and just in general, just to that end, VMworld is more accessible this year, right? Whereas there's usually 25,000 people that are lucky enough to make their way to San Francisco or Vegas, wherever it is. This year, that's going to be open up to everybody truly live, right? So I guess on that end, this will be the biggest VMworld ever, right? Like in terms of people, I'd love to get a look at the final
it's definitely
numbers.
Going to be interesting because I've only been to a couple of VMworlds, believe it or not. And when I don't go, I usually follow it on Twitter, right? And even when you're there, right, you always have your phone out and you're checking the hashtags and you're meeting people off of Twitter and all this other stuff. So there's always that community focus, but this is really going to be kind of leveled up, maybe turned up to 11 this year with kind of the full-on virtual experience. And I know that VM Underground is doing a lot of great stuff around that too. I think there's a Discord server, and I was talking to Michael the other day, and I'm like, what is Discord? Don't I have to like talk to people with my voice? Like, I don't understand this. So whether or not I personally make it onto the Discord server, that's still up for debate. But just another really great way for everybody to interact in the community. And I'm sure, you know, everybody's going to be on Twitter. There's lots of hashtags. I know a couple years VMworld has actually trended on Twitter during the keynote, and everybody gets all excited about that. So I think it's going to be an interesting experience. I think it's still going to be a great experience, really, for all the attendees.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll touch on that Discord as well. Like, so from a community point of view, obviously with this virtual world that we're in, where we can't interact on the platform very well, there's no like hangout space or chat function, which is where likes of Slack, which is what HashiCorp actually did for HashiConf. But Discord is what the guys, so they're calling it Orbital Jigsaw. And they've been doing it. I've been in there quite early on, and it's where they're doing a live stream. Like they'll sit there in a chat room live stream that so that you can have a conversation about what the keynotes look like, what the breakouts look like, and then people from the community may even do a subset breakout session on some of the features and topics there. They did it this week for Ignite. They're doing it again, probably at a larger scale for VMworld. But yeah, really interesting way of sharing that community feel that we get when we're in person. But I don't think we've yet found that way of doing it from a remote point of view just yet.
Yeah. So speaking of community and virtual events, I think we have a bunch of viewers tuned in right now to us from like all over the world, basically. So let's see, where do we have people from? We have people from Latvia, Turkey, India, Argentina, Ivory Coast, Palestine, Germany, Iran, Algeria, South Africa, Ohio, Sydney. But wait, there's more. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, the Ukraine. So basically, this is a really good example of what happens with these live events and these virtual events, right? You can connect with people. Yeah, you can connect with people across the world.
We were talking about Brazil earlier, Melissa, actually, as well. So that's fantastic.
We were, yeah. So
yeah, let's move on though, because we haven't mentioned the party, right? So if we look,
I have never been to a VMworld Veeam party. I have to confess that. Like, I work for Veeam now. I've never been to the party when I went to VMworld. Gotta confess.
Yeah, and it is legendary. And Michael and I have got stories that we can't share live on air. And we had, funnily enough, a couple of years ago, actually, Michael and I nearly missed our session because we got to the party. We said we'd go back at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock came, and then we saw another section open, and all of a sudden it was 12:30, 1 o'clock, and we were eating Subway and, just having a good time. And
that, mate, like our boss, it says that people are watching from Ohio. Our boss.
Yeah. No, it might not be our boss. It might not be our boss.
It was a great session.
There's a whole big Veeam office in Ohio. It could be like all these Veemers in Ohio. It is not necessarily Rick Vanover creeping our stream. Come on.
What I would say though to that end is that we actually delivered it and still knocked it out of the park. So there you go.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Don't give away the trade secrets, so to speak. But no. So this year, who have we got? I was really excited when we announced this. So we've got a guy who goes by the name of DJ Diesel. Now, those that know DJ Diesel might also know him as the Shaq, Shaquille O'Neal. So this is really exciting for me. I'm a massive basketball fan. So I'm really excited to see Shaq live. I watch him almost every morning on ESPN. It's NBA playoffs at the moment. So I love the guy. Got a lot of his basketball cards. So yeah, I'm just like a super fan. So what he's gonna do, he's gonna come and have a live Q&A for about 15 minutes. So I encourage all you guys to come on then. I think it's 5 p.m. Eastern from memory. There's a few links coming up on the screen now. So he's going to come on, have a bit of a chat. You've got to listen hard because he tends to mumble and speak real deep and stuff. But we'll have a good chat with him. But then he's going to do a 45-minute DJ session as well. And to be fair, he's actually not a bad DJ. He's been doing it for years, since the 90s. In fact, I think one of our guys who used to work in a team saw him at, what's that one called in Europe? That massive
Tomorrowland.
Tomorrowland.
Yeah, so he did that. So
yeah, if you want to go and see it before you sign up or commit the time to it, go and watch some of the stuff on YouTube. He's an entertainer, that's for sure.
That's it, yeah. And he does a thing called Shacked in the Fool as well, which I love. It's one of his things that he does on ESPN. So no, he's a great guy. So really excited about that. It's a bit of a coup that we're able to get him, and almost a shame that we're not there to see him in real life, right? So yes, that's great. That's the party. Just rolling through it as well. There's the whole experience. We've got the virtual booth. There's swag that we're giving away. We're going to give away some T-shirts. The VMware Alliances team, shout out to them. They're busy behind the scenes doing a lot of the work, as the conduit between VMware and Veeam and that relationship. So on that particular site, veeam.com/VMworld, you'll see the Alliances team led by Matt Lloyd. So kudos to you guys for, again, creating a great event, and kudos to the events team for putting it together, because, it's pretty hard to do this all virtually and make it come off and, seem like a really good event. So I think we're all looking forward to that. I think VMworld in itself, it's going to be interesting. I guess we probably can finish off by just talking about what we feel VMware might announce next week. Like, I know that not really sure what to expect from an announcement point of view. But Melissa, what do you reckon? What do you reckon's coming? What's their big thing? Because they usually do one big thing.
One big thing. I think it'll just be stuff that's relevant to customers wherever they are in their journey within their data centers to the cloud, right? Because we talked about the sessions, right? And I think that's kind of like a sneak preview to what the main announcements are going to be. The good thing is that VMware can enable you on your cloud journey wherever you are, right? So if you're at the beginning, if you're there for a while, if you want to go all in to VMC or to Google, VMware Engine and Google or Azure, whatever, VMware's there for you. So I think we're just going to see kind of the continuing themes going on.
What do you reckon, Michael? What's your prediction for next week?
So I think, given how fast that has ramped up from VMware on AWS or VMware on cloud somewhere in someone else's data center, I think it's going to be something related to that. I think it's going to be something to do with the whole hybrid multi-cloud type messaging, some sort of portability type thing, and that's just me guessing, right? If I'm right, then yeah, great. But I just think it'll be something along them lines. They've already got everything in place that allows them to do that. It's just connecting them. And I think
that's why I'm struggling to think of something specific, because I feel like over the past few years they've built it up. I mean, if I look back, I mean, the acquisition, and I've said this before in many different areas, the acquisition of Nicira was so critical to everything that they're doing now. Nicira is the underlay and the overlay, actually, that basically enables all this to happen, right? So Nicira being NSX, NSXV, NSXT now. NSXT is almost completely taken over. NSXV is nearing end of life. But being able, the hardest part of any multi-cloud, hybrid cloud was always the networking. It was always the hard part. How do you stretch the networking? How do you make workloads portable at the application layer, right? Like Veeam, we talk about workload mobility once you've transferred it into a repository, right? Which is a great way to do it. But in terms of the application layer, it's a lot harder to do that there, right? You need solid networking, software defined. You need security. I mean, they've got Velo Cloud now. They've bought a ton of security there.
Yeah, I think that security piece will be a massive thing as well, mentioned this week. Like with the announcements that they made last year, it'd be interesting to see where and what and how that's been developed in the last 12 months.
Actually, you're right. Did they announce Carbon Black last year?
I was just thinking the same thing. Was it last year?
It's already been a year. And
it's only been a year. Wow.
Yeah, and I actually know, because I've been trying to sort of not do a little bit with it, but I'm interested in it, right? And I think it's not really integrated at all at the moment. And this is only a couple of months ago, so it'd be interesting to see if they announce some deeper integration of the product into the stack. Maybe some integration with the Tanzu. I don't know, but certainly around that, I think they're pretty much done for storage. Amazingly, you look at Vsphere and ESXi. I don't know if you guys checked an update one, but the max limits on them now are something crazy.
So, okay, I'm gonna have to keep.
You should know, Melissa.
30 seconds. I'm sorry, but if you look at the U1 payload as a whole and everything that came in it, it was all about scalability, right? All about scalability.
Yeah. There you go. So interesting times. I think it's going to be a great event still. I mean, even though it's not in person, I still think it's got so much value for everyone in the community. I'd encourage everyone again just to go in there, go to the content catalog, register. You can win a free major pass from us, veeam.com/VMworld. Please go to our sessions, attend the party, do the V-Trail map. I think I've mentioned everything, but I think with that, this is the end of episode 9 across 2 different platforms. We vMotion successfully, and now we're going to power off.
Suspend.
See you guys later.